I am Professor Richard D. Wolff, and thank you for joining me. Ladies and gentlemen, let's step back from the noise of the headlines and ask a deeper question. What does it mean when Russia launches a rocket and the entire world trembles? Is it really about military might? Or is it the symptom of something far larger, a crumbling global order where economic desperation and geopolitical decline drive nations to flex their weapons instead of fixing their systems? Because make no mistake, this rocket test is not just a scientific demonstration, it's a political message, a cry of defiance from Moscow to Washington, from Putin to NATO. When Vladimir Putin teases a hidden weapon, he's not merely showing off military power. He's sending a warning that Russia, cornered by sanctions, isolated by the West, and economically pressured for over a decade, is not going to collapse quietly. Russia's recent rocket test has shaken the corridors of global power and reignited old fears buried since the Cold War. What the world witnessed was not merely the launch of a projectile into the sky, it was a calculated political statement from Moscow, a message aimed squarely at Washington, Brussels, and every capital that has tried to contain Russian influence since the invasion of Ukraine. When Vladimir Putin hinted at a hidden weapon, it was not simply an act of bravado. It was a strategic tease designed to remind the world that Russia, despite facing crushing sanctions and diplomatic isolation, still holds the capability and the will to redefine the global balance of power. The moment that rocket pierced the clouds, it wasn't science that took center stage, it was symbolism, the language of strength in a world increasingly ruled by military spectacle. For years, Western leaders and analysts have portrayed Russia as a declining power weighed down by economic stagnation, corruption, and a brain drain of its brightest minds. Yet this test sends an entirely different message. Decline does not mean disappearance. Russia has mastered the art of turning pressure into propulsion, converting its geopolitical isolation into a narrative of defiance. Every successful launch, every display of technological prowess is an act of political theater, a demonstration to its citizens that Russia remains resilient and to the world that Moscow will not be sidelined. It's a reminder that humiliation breeds hostility and that Western sanctions may have done more to harden Russia's resolve than to weaken it. But beneath this drama lies a deeper reality about global power itself. The rocket test is not only about asserting military superiority, it's about reclaiming prestige in a system that measures strength not by social progress or moral authority, but by the ability to project force. This is where the irony of modern geopolitics emerges. Nations that boast about freedom and democracy continue to define their greatness through the size of their arsenals. Putin understands this hypocrisy well, and he exploits it brilliantly. By staging this test right after alluding to a mysterious, secret weapon, he turned international curiosity into strategic advantage. He didn't have to reveal the weapon. The mere suggestion of it was enough to send analysts, markets, and military planners into a frenzy. Fear, after all, is the most cost-effective weapon of all. In the halls of NATO, the reaction was swift: emergency briefings, intelligence reviews, and public statements dripping with cautious language. Yet the truth is that no one was truly surprised. Russia's defiance has become predictable, but the precision and timing of this move were masterful. It came at a moment when the West is distracted, embroiled in internal political divisions, struggling with inflation, and managing multiple crises from the Middle East to Eastern Europe. Putin knows how to read the global room, and he chose his moment perfectly. In one act, he reasserted Russia's presence on the world stage, reminding both allies and adversaries that he can still command global attention with a single launch. What makes this episode so significant is not the technical details of the missile, but the psychology behind it. It reveals how power now operates, not merely through warfare, but through the performance of strength. In a media-saturated age, military tests are not only military exercises, they are political spectacles designed to influence markets, shape narratives, and control perceptions. Russia's rocket test was a message written in fire across the sky: we are not finished. We are not afraid. And as the world watched that glowing trail fade into the atmosphere, one truth became undeniable: Moscow had once again mastered the art of turning global attention into geopolitical leverage. The test may have lasted minutes, but its echo will linger in the halls of power for years. The air of unease sweeping through Western capitals after Russia's recent rocket test feels eerily familiar. A ghost from a past era reawakening. The world, it seems, is drifting back into the shadow of the Cold War, where every launch, every maneuver, and every statement from Moscow or Washington becomes a symbol of ideological rivalry and global dominance. When the Russian government unveiled its new rocket test just days after Putin's cryptic remarks about a hidden weapon, it wasn't merely a technological showcase, it was a deliberate psychological strike. The timing, the tone, and the secrecy were carefully crafted to remind the world that the old Cold War lines may have faded on maps, but they remain very much alive in the minds of global powers. And in that single moment, the illusion of stability shattered, replaced by a chilling sense of DH view. Across Europe and the United States, military analysts scrambled to assess what this test meant. Was it a message, a warning, or the beginning of something far larger? NATO's response was cautious but anxious, and rightly so. The alliance finds itself once again in a familiar posture, not of cooperation but confrontation. The rocket launch was more than an act of defiance. It was a test of the world's balance of fear. Moscow knows precisely how to play this game. It understands that even the hint of advanced weaponry can unsettle global markets, fracture diplomatic unity, and force the West into reaction mode. The real victory for Russia wasn't the launch itself, it was the psychological turbulence it caused across global corridors of power. For decades, the Cold War was defined not by direct conflict, but by perception: who could appear stronger, faster, more capable of annihilation. Today, that same dynamic has returned in a more sophisticated form. With information warfare, cyber manipulation, and controlled leaks, the contest has evolved, but the essence remains unchanged. Russia's rocket test fits neatly into this revived narrative. It's not about starting a war, it's about keeping the world perpetually on edge, ensuring that Moscow remains a central figure in every Western strategy meeting. In the language of geopolitics, fear equals relevance, and Putin knows it. But behind this power play lies a broader and more troubling reality: the global order is unraveling. When the Soviet Union collapsed, many in the West declared the end of history. believing liberal democracy had triumphed forever. Yet here we are, decades later, watching as history returns with vengeance. The old blocks may have new names, but the logic is the same: a divided world where militarization replaces diplomacy and suspicion replaces trust. The US deploys missiles in Europe under the banner of deterrence, while Russia responds with tests that blur the line between defense and provocation. Each side insists the other is the aggressor, and both use that fear to justify expanding their military budgets. It's the same old playbook repackaged for the 21st century. The emotional manipulation behind it all is perhaps the most dangerous element. Ordinary people struggling with inflation, energy crisis, and economic inequality are once again being taught to look outward, to see the enemy not in the failures of their governments, but in the threat of the other. Putin's test, in that sense, serves both East and West alike. It gives Russia a rallying cry of national pride while allowing Western leaders to revive old narratives of defense and unity. The great Cold War theater is being restaged, and every player, knowingly or not, has taken their position on the stage. In the end, this resurgence of Cold War tension tells us something deeper about the modern world. When economic systems falter, political systems reach for militarism. When diplomacy fails, symbolism replaces substance. Russia's rocket test may have lasted only a few minutes, but its implications are profound. It has reignited a psychological war that never truly ended. The world is once again divided between those who command power and those who fear it. And as nations race to prove their strength, it becomes clear that the Cold War never really died. It simply changed its costume, waiting for the perfect moment to step back into the spotlight. Behind every missile launch and every fiery speech lies a quieter, more dangerous battlefield, the economic one. Russia's rocket test, dramatic as it may seem, is the surface expression of something deeper: a nation under intense economic pressure, transforming hardship into defiance. When Vladimir Putin teases a hidden weapon and follows it with a powerful display of military technology, he's not just posturing for global dominance, he's signaling to the world and to his own people that Russia's survival instincts remain fierce even in the face of Western isolation. This is not just a story of missiles and might, it's a story of economics, resilience, and a system forced to turn its weaknesses into symbols of power. Since the invasion of Ukraine, the Russian economy has faced a relentless storm of Western sanctions, billions in frozen assets, the collapse of Western trade partnerships, and the withdrawal of foreign companies have all struck deep wounds. Yet instead of breaking, Russia adapted, pivoting to alternative markets, deepening ties with China, Iran, and other non-Western partners, and using energy exports as both a lifeline and a weapon. Every rocket test now doubles as a statement: Russia may be sanctioned, but it's not subdued. Putin understands the psychological game of modern geopolitics. In a global system where economic narratives define power, projecting strength becomes an economic necessity. The test was not only a military act, it was an economic signal, a declaration that Moscow can still command global attention and investor anxiety with a single launch. There is an undeniable irony here. The same global capitalist system that once integrated Russia into its markets has now turned against it, and yet it is through that same system that Russia continues to fight back. When Western powers use sanctions to choke economies, they inadvertently reinforce the very nationalism they hope to weaken. Putin, ever the political strategist, turns that isolation into a rallying cry, framing Russia as a fortress besieged by Western greed and hypocrisy. Inside the country, propaganda spins economic pain into patriotic endurance, telling citizens that hardship is the price of sovereignty. The message is clear: economic suffering becomes proof of loyalty, not failure. But this economic defiance comes at a steep cost. Russia's dependence on militarization to sustain its economy is a symptom of a larger sickness: the global economy's addiction to war. When domestic industries falter and consumer markets shrink, nations often turn to defense production as a lifeline. It creates jobs, it fuels innovation, and it stirs national pride. Yet it also diverts massive resources from civilian needs, healthcare, education, infrastructure, into the machinery of destruction. The rockets may rise higher, but the living standards below continue to fall. This is not unique to Russia. The same pattern is visible in the United States, China, and nearly every major power. Militarization becomes the economic therapy of failing systems, each missile a costly prescription for a deeper disease. And here lies the most striking revelation: the arms race is not just about protection, it's about profit. Corporations, oligarchs, and governments all benefit from the perpetual state of tension. Every new weapon test spikes defense stocks, justifies bloated military budgets, and keeps industries humming. In this context, Russia's rocket test is not an isolated provocation. It's part of the global economic logic that transforms fear into business. When Putin flaunts new weaponry, Western leaders respond in kind, ensuring that the cycle of spending, fear, and competition never stops. It is a carefully choreographed dance between adversaries who publicly condemn one another while privately feeding the same economic system that thrives on instability. The truth is, the rocket launch was not only a signal to NATO or the United States, it was a signal to the markets, to Russia's domestic elite, and to its allies watching closely. It said Russia is still a player in this game, and it will not be ignored. The thunder of that rocket wasn't just military might echoing through the skies. It was the sound of a nation converting its economic pain into political theater. It is a dangerous spectacle, one that reveals how capitalism, when cornered, finds survival not in peace, but in the profitable chaos of perpetual conflict. The world today is standing on the edge of a new arms race, one that's faster, more dangerous, and far more complex than the one that haunted the 20th century. Russia's recent rocket test is not just a technological feat, it's a signal that the old competition for military supremacy has been reignited with a vengeance. From Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Brussels, nations are once again building their power on the foundations of fear. What began as a strategic rivalry is morphing into a global scramble for dominance, where diplomacy is drowned out by the roar of engines and the gleam of new weapons. Every launch, every unveiling, every military exercise is no longer a defensive measure. It's a performance, a declaration that the race is on and nobody wants to be left behind. When Vladimir Putin hinted at a hidden weapon and followed it with the rocket test that stunned the world, he didn't just provoke anxiety, he reignited an entire global mindset. The United States, already pouring billions into hypersonic missile research, immediately began assessing its own strategic posture. China, watching closely, continues to expand its military industrial base at an unprecedented rate. Europe, trapped between the ambitions of superpowers, debates rearmament while its economies strain under inflation and public discontent. In this tense environment, one act of defiance from Moscow becomes the spark that sets off a chain reaction across continents. The message has been received loud and clear. The arms race is no longer history, it's the new normal. But beneath the politics and posturing lies the brutal logic of modern power. The arms race is not just about security, it's about control of economies, resources, and the narratives that justify endless spending. Each nation claims its buildup is defensive, but all know that in a global capitalist order, strength is measured not in peace, but in potential destruction. For governments struggling to maintain legitimacy amid rising inequality and public anger, military might offers a convenient distraction. It unites citizens under the banner of nationalism, diverts attention from economic failure, and turns fear into fuel for political survival. Russia's rocket test was, in this sense, not an act of aggression alone, it was a strategic spectacle designed to remind the world that power, in its rawest form, still commands attention. The tragedy is that this race feeds on itself. As one side accelerates, the others must follow. The United States, facing technological competition from both Russia and China, expands its defense budget to record highs. NATO members, pressured by Washington, pledge billions more in military spending, even as their citizens face rising living costs. Asian powers respond in kind, building new alliances, upgrading missiles, and strengthening naval fleets. Each nation insists it is merely responding to threats, but those threats exist because every other nation is doing exactly the same thing. It is a circular logic, a perpetual motion machine of fear that keeps the world in a state of profitable tension. What makes this new arms race especially dangerous is its invisibility. Unlike the old nuclear standoffs, today's weapons are faster, smaller, and harder to detect. Hypersonic missiles can evade traditional defense systems. Cyber weapons can cripple economies without a single explosion. Artificial intelligence now shapes the future of warfare, where decisions of life and death may soon be made not by humans, but by algorithms. And behind it all stands the same motive: profit. Every contract signed, every missile built, every satellite launched feeds an industrial machine that depends on insecurity to survive. For the military industrial complex, peace is bad for business. Russia's rocket test may have lasted only moments, but its political and economic aftershocks will last for years. It revealed not only Moscow's defiance, but the collective weakness of a world order addicted to militarization. The superpowers may frame their actions as defense, but what they truly defend is the system itself, a system that equates dominance with safety and competition with progress. The more the world arms itself, the less secure it becomes. And yet no one dares to stop, because to stop would mean confronting the uncomfortable truth that peace under capitalism is simply unprofitable. In that truth lies the real danger, not the rockets in the sky, but the system that ensures there will always be another one waiting to launch. So when you see that headline, Russia's rocket test stuns the world, Don't just think of missiles and explosions. Think of